There's a game being played right before our eyes in the Catholic media for anyone with the attentiveness to notice it. It seems that everyone across the ideological spectrum in the church is trying to take Pope Leo XIV and turn him into their guy, their ideological ally. Whether it's a from traditionally minded conservative cardinals and bishops and voices who are assuring everybody any moment now he's going to restore the traditional mass by restoring some more pontificum, or at least loosening the restrictions on traditionis custodes, or if it's on the other hand from the James Martin types that he's going to continue the work of Pope Francis in every way imaginable. There's a concerted effort to make him look like he's their guy. We're going to look at that claim, at least from the modernist angle today. I'm going to show you how they're trying to do this. On top of the report from yesterday, where Pope Leo XIV appointed, frankly, an unspeakably evil prelate to a high post in Australia, causing an international firestorm. Yesterday social media was alight with the stories being shared across and on X, on Facebook, anywhere you care to name. People were having a conversation and people were shocked by that bishop that he appointed, Bishop McInlay. This could be of concern to some, or it could clarify for others why he made that appointment. If you're looking for what would look like a good, valid reason why someone who placed pagan idols in their cathedral and overtly rejected the moral teaching of the church and overtly called for the ordination of women in violation of all of sacramental theology, why somebody like that, who is frankly a heretic, would get a promotion by the Pope. Tomorrow, barring some huge news, I plan to cover how the better bishops are playing the same game and why, frankly, they will likely be very disappointed. Let's go to Catholic Conclave to sort of set up the story. And they reposted something from Info Vaticana, which I appreciate because Info Vaticana is a great website, except their pop-up ads make it hard to use the site. But the article they reposted is this. Headline: Can Pope Leo afford to keep Cardinals Fernandez and Parolin in post if he wants to clean up the mess left by Francis? They want to, the modernists want to abolish papal authority, and by extension, the papacy itself. And one of the things you're going to see here is a claim that essentially Parolin is seen as almost conservative by the modernists. Now, his track record is not that, but it is clear he hasn't gone off the deep end as far as, say, the German bishops or Fernandez or any of the really the most troubling of the cardinals and the bishops. But the modernists want to abolish papal authority, and by extension, the papacy itself. And we've seen this going back to Vatican II, where they tried to force the council to reduce the Pope to a figurehead, basically, first among equals, as the Orthodox see him. Paul VI managed to put the brakes on that to a degree. But ever since then, bishops have felt free to just ignore what the Pope demands when it comes to upholding Catholic orthodoxy, meaning the moral teachings of the church. The biggest, easiest, most notorious example I can come up with is the Winnipeg Statement from the Canadian bishops, who in the aftermath of Humanae Vitae basically told their parishioners, don't worry about this document, it doesn't apply to you, go ahead and use the pill if you want to. That's what they did. They did that. And nothing happened to them. We've also seen this repeatedly in the talk of synodality, reducing the authority of the Pope, elevating the authority of the bishops and the laity, the hand-picked laity. And this, what you're about to see, is what would look like in practice. It is their scheme. So the question they're asking is, can he afford to keep Fernandez and Parolin in the post if they want to clean up the mess left by Francis? Here's what they have to say. Quote, there they are without concealment. They tell, the modernists do, that the Pope that he cannot remove Tuco Fernandez from the doctrine of the faith, except to promote him to some bishop or something of similar substance, meaning give him an equally high-profile post. They demand that he dismiss Parolin and Peña Pata as soon as possible. Pietro Parolin, the Cardinal Secretary of State, the person everybody seemingly thought was the front runner to be Pope before the conclave, and Peña Pata, neither of whom are conservatives. Neither of these guys are. Parolin had said some pretty awful things doctrinally before the conclave, and everybody was worried about him. And in case he doesn't remember what he owes to certain friendly press, they remind Leo XIV again of the accusations prior to the conclave, emphasizing that only religion digital defended him. The accusations there we're talking about are how in April and in May leading up to the conclave, and some of it reported afterwards, that Cardinal Prevost was accused in Chicago before he moved to South America, and in Peru of hiding away evil priests of a Macaric kind. And there has been minimal response to that and minimal coverage of that because a lot of us are just doing the wait and see thing. But these accusations came out in the days ahead of the conclave because word had gotten out that actually the frontrunner was Prevost the whole time. You can go back through Info Vaticano articles on that if you want to, and you can see how that was the case, how they reported on that before May 8th several times. Translation: we, the modernist media, you owe us to be there. Don't forget to whom you owe loyalty. There are some translation issues with this. It's grotesque. At Info Vaticana, they decided not to dwell on the past accusations, since he was elected pope, out of respect for his office and to avoid hindering his mission. But the press, which claims to be close to the new pope, his biggest allies, reminds him of it daily, like a credit note they intend to cash in. They tell him, without us, you wouldn't be there. Behave yourself. What they're saying is there's a media campaign to pressure him to give the modernists what they want, by making it look like the part of the reason he's even there is because the media helped him. Some of us noticed during the conclave that the accusations about Parolin were perfectly timed to destroy him. And then the accusations about Tagle came literally minutes after the news started to circulate that his stock was rising in the conclave. And then you had accusations against Cardinal Pizzaballa about things he said that would have alienated the James Martin crowd in the hierarchy, all of it. And this is that is what they're referencing here. Vidal's text repeats like a mantra that Leo XIV has opted for castling, like in chess. Move a few pieces, protect oneself, don't attack yet. But that's not what they fear. What scares them is that the Pope has begun to move, that he's seeing, that he's thinking, that he's discerning. And when one begins to look, to speak with victims, to listen to the faithful base of the church, one can end up cleansing, not for ideology, but for justice. That's what they don't tolerate. They want him paralyzed, meaning unable to act. They demand that he bless everything that came before with his signature, that he not look back, that he remain silent, that he not listen to those who wept during years of confusion and abandonment. And here they are referencing the crushing of religious orders and the crushing of the traditional mass, and that there are people demanding the Pope act to undo the damage done by Francis, especially on those fronts. And they're saying, don't do it. Keep the past where it was. They are demanding obedience while preaching the abolition of the papacy. And all this, pay attention, is done by a media outlet that just published a lengthy article entitled Reimagining a Church of Jesus Without a Papacy. This paragraph is from today. This is what they're talking about here from that article. Having lost their last best hope in Francis, modernists move from reimagining the papacy to reimagining this church without the papacy, the logical conclusion of the synodal path. Not to reform the church, not to purify the church, but to functionally abolish it. And they say all this in seriousness, in the name of Jesus, of humanity, of the new synodal paradigm, and with the support of theologians who deny the Petrine institution, the magisterium, and even the existence of binding truth. Do they have the legitimacy to impose anything? No. And we're not the only ones saying this. We're talking about people who have even publicly insulted St. Therese of Calcutta, as Jose Manuel Vidal himself has done in the past. Everything that doesn't fit their agenda gets in their way, whether it's a holy nun or a prudent pope. And they go on to ask if Leo has essentially the fortitude to withstand them. They want to abolish papal authority. And here's the topics they'll be using to pressure him, knowing full well that on some of these topics he is on their side. After all, he celebrated Francis's Laudato Si document publicly multiple times, linked it to synodality, which is a problem, frankly, and they've even started Laudato Si celebrations, as I covered recently on this channel, announcing how St. Peter's Basilica is getting a sustainable development reform. Ridiculous stuff. But here is how they're going to do this. They're first going to start with, well, this comes from the Austrian bishops. Headline from Catholic Conclave. Austrian Bishops' Conference General Assembly press release. Urgency of ecological conversion. One mention of God fails to mention Jesus or Christ. Or better to say the real absence of Christ from the modern church, and then they wonder why their churches are empty. So what you have here is the Austrian bishops putting public pressure on the Pope to act on a whole bunch of hot-button secular political issues that have nothing to do with the salvation of souls. They issued a press release of issues they demand the Pope deal with. They're all, again, hot-button geopolitical issues that jump right out of the pages of Malachi Martin's Windswept House. But I'm just going to skip to this one section here on the call for ecological conversion, because it's an utterly ridiculous thing that perfectly aligns the church as an instrument to be used by the secular diabolical powers that should have nothing to do with the church, that the church should be standing in opposition to. Groups that Francis allowed to have their meetings in Rome, have their conferences at the Vatican multiple times. Here's point 3 from their press release. 10 years of Laudato Si. The world finally needs an ecological conversion. Note, the conversion is ecological, not a Christian conversion, not a conversion to Christ, not to live a sacramental life in a way only offered by the Catholic Church. No, it needs an ecological conversion. 10 years ago, on June 18th, 2015, Pope Francis published the encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home. With this letter, the Pope reached the consciences of so many people of goodwill who are committed to God's good creation and socially just coexistence. Laudato Si highlighted the ecological and social crises of our time with unprecedented clarity and called for a holistic ecology that considers the environment, society, economy, and spirituality together. The concept of ecological conversion has since become a leitmotif of church environmental work. Its spiritual source is the emotion of the beauty of creation, which gives hope and urges action. As an aside, in Pascendi Dominici Gregis by Pope Pius X, where he defined the heresy of modernism, one of the hallmarks of it is essentially basing theological conversation on the emotions of individual believers. It's a considerable error. One of the hearts goes to the very heart of modernism. And you see the same logic, by the way, on the James Martin sin. The emotion of those who are in servitude to that sin and who identify with that sin in particular. 10 years later, the global community faces even greater ecological and social challenges, from the thermometer problem and the loss of biodiversity to growing inequality. A sober look at human-induced, problems makes it clear that all efforts to date are still far from slowing the alleged problem that they are defending. Heat, drought, floods, and agricultural production losses continue to worsen, especially in Europe. As a recently published National Thermometer Issue report shows, Austria is disproportionately affected by this. At the same time, many people have become more aware of the need for ecological conversion. The numerous projects that have been realized in Austrian parishes and dioceses are encouraging. There is numerous and diverse as church life and such creation issues. The projects and voluntary commitment range from energy self-sufficient schools to food rescue, sustainable cemetery design, the establishment of energy communities, and photovoltaic initiatives. And they frame this in the survival of humanity. Laudato Si is their roadmap for this. It's all materialistic. It's all about making a better world. What it isn't about is the gospel, the salvation of souls, picking up your cross and following Christ, wrestling with those sins that dominate your life, that send you to confession on a regular basis, or even the need to go to confession. None of that was mentioned there. How do you square Laudato Si with anything Christ said in his ministry? Anything in the scriptures? Good luck. Good luck with that. I've tried. I've read Laudato Si numerous times. I couldn't do it. Now, that subject in particular is the angle they're going to deal with, or at least trying to hit the Pope with. It's at least one of many. And it's compounded by the fact that he has himself recently publicly said many positive things about it. It's kind of a troubling sign. But they're not the only ones doing this. See, from the National Catholic Reporter, which, by the way, They begin laying off their writers. It sounds like they're on the verge of bankruptcy. We get this headline from the National Catholic Reporter, and you see it along the same thread. What role will Pope Leo XIV play in the future of Laudato Si ecological action? I'm just going to go over this because not the whole thing. This thing spends a lot of time talking about the glories of Pope Francis's work on the environment and how all of this stuff was brought new life into the church and all this. Let's see what they say about Pope Leo XIV, though. Quote, what role the new pope may play is still unfolding. Gold was among the Laudato Si movement leaders who met with Leo XIV in St. Peter's Square. She called it a great encounter that left her hopeful he will build upon the environmental foundation Francis left. In his still early papacy, Leo has referenced Laudato Si on several occasions. It has had an extraordinary impact, inspiring countless initiatives and teaching everyone to listen to the twofold cry of the earth and of the poor, he said on May 25th, in marking the 10-year anniversary. Earlier in May, he encouraged participants at a Rio de Janeiro ecological gathering of 200 Catholic universities and organizations across 3 continents to be builders of bridges of integration between the Americas and the Iberian Peninsula, working for ecological, social, and environmental justice. So, for those who don't know, I don't really talk about my credentials much, but I have a PhD in public policy, and I wrote my doctoral dissertation on Laudato Si. And I had to study a whole lot of the sustainable development literature, especially from like the philosophy side of things. And when you see this phrase, environmental justice, that should in being uttered by a Catholic or by any politician, that is a gigantic red flag. Red especially. Think of what the color red is associated with in politics. And it should be a gigantic red flag because especially in South America, the subject of environmental justice has always been linked with essentially Marxist movements. Be wary when you see that. This week, he instructed the bishops of Madagascar to make care for creation an integral part of your prophetic mission. How one pope carries on the emphases and unfinished work of his predecessor is not a new question in the long history of the Roman Catholic Church. It was Paul VI, for instance, who continued the 1962 to 65 Second Vatican Council after John the 23rd passed away in 63. Early in his papacy, Francis himself completed an encyclical, Lumen Fide, begun by Pope Benedict XVI. And it goes on to this, and, talking about Leo XIV choosing his name based on Leo XIII and all the rest of that stuff. But they are using Leo's words to try to pressure him to continue the work of Francis. And it's worth noting here that Leo XIV himself stated numerous times from the Loggia on that day, on May 8th, when he emerged as the Pope, and later on, that he was going to continue Francis's reforms, whatever that means. And he evokes synodality a whole lot. But not to be undone, there is another obvious ploy the modernists are going with on this one. James Martin's favorite sin. James Martin is media savvy and often given a platform by secular media. I'll show you a case in point here that I unfortunately can't really use. I can't really just go with this, show you the clip because it's copyrighted and the language used in it is incredibly spicy by YouTube standards. It's from Good Morning America. Secular media, I believe they're ABC. This is from, of course, the United States for those watching overseas who aren't quite familiar with it. I can't play the clip, but here's a summary. See, on Good Morning America, they recount how, according to recent polling data, 75% of Catholics in America support the James Martin crowd and think they should be accepted by society, and by extension, how the church should change to accommodate them. That's media pressure. Media pressure on popes goes back at least to Vatican II. At least. Cardinal Ratzinger, Pope Benedict XVI, referred to Vatican II, the Second Vatican Council, as the media council because the outside media were putting great pressure on the bishops who were participating at the council, to the point that with their reporting, numerous religious and numerous priests thought the church was going to change its teachings on celibacy. And when it didn't at the council, many priests left, citing those media reports. It's not the first time. This goes back 60 years. And they're using him They're using the media to pressure the Pope. And they are doing this because he has said conflicting things on the James Martin sin. And he's been doing this for like the last 10, 12, 15 years. You can find reports of him as Cardinal Prevost, as before that Bishop Prevost, saying that the James Martin sin, its associated ideology and political movement, essentially are helping to destroy Christian civilization. And he wasn't wrong when he said that. And then he started repeating things Francis said. Everyone's welcome in church, all that stuff. And they latched onto that in this report, trying to pressure him to take a side. They're trying to get him to say something publicly to reaffirm what Francis said about not judging. And they use James Martin as the face of the church to make their point, calling him highly respected, which I found fascinating, in their video report. I'll have a link to it at the show notes at returntotradition.org, not long after this live stream is finished. Go watch it for yourself if you really want to see it. Now, the modernists over at the Archbishop of Detroit have gone full political. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is another way. You see, the Pope's American, and the American bishops are acting as if they've been unfettered when it comes to just political activism. We've seen this since really the inauguration back in January. But here we have the Archdiocese of Detroit with this. Happy Juneteenth today. We celebrate the end of involuntary servitude in the U.S. as we commemorate the enduring resilience of African-American communities. In this Jubilee of Hope, we affirm that Christ's salvation is for all, and that justice and liberation are signs of his kingdom. It's right out of liberation theology. This is to say nothing about the weirdness of this secular feast day in general. But they got a lot of pushback on this. I thought today was Corpus Christi. Y'all Catholic, right? I mean, notice that was a Feast of Corpus Christi just kind of came and went with very little mention. Another person says the TLM was canceled for this. Some rude gestures being posted in response. People were not happy with this, and they shouldn't be. You notice they do this, and they never get punished. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But there's an alternative. The Pope wants to make clear that he's not with the modernists. Michael Hitchborn over at the Lepanto Institute has posted this. It's a reminder he could just simply enforce one of the most basic tenets, one of the most basic teachings from a council. Michael Hitchborn posted this saying, earlier this month, Father Frederick Daly, an openly James Martin-type priest, blasphemy celebrated a redacted mass, a Skittles mass, if you will. Taste the rainbow, as they say in their commercials. Michael Hitchborn continues saying the church has very strict teachings on how such individuals are to be handled. Now, keeping in mind the pressure that he's getting from the modernists on that subject, here's what the Third Lateran Council declared. Quote, anyone caught in the practice of the sin against nature, on account of which the wrath of God was unleashed upon the children of disobedience, if he is a cleric, let him be demoted from his state and kept in reclusion in a monastery to do penance. If he is a layman, let him be excommunicated and kept rigorously distant from the communion of the faithful. That is the Third Lateran Council. Meaning James Martin would be demoted from his state, meaning reduced to the lay state, and kept in reclusion in a monastery to do penance. Third Lateran Council declared that is how you deal with these types. Why hasn't that been done? It's a law from a council. Those don't just get overturned by new codes of canon law being issued, after all. The issue here at hand is this. All of these articles are written by their authors to make it look like that Leo is Francis II, but a nicer guy. Now, is that true? Many of you watching would say yes. Others would say no. Others would say we don't know. And this is compounded by this piece from a couple of days ago on religionnews.com. And this is one of those that many people will take to be essentially all the proof they need. Religionnews.com with this unfortunate headline. The conclave was easy, say Francis allies who see Leo as natural successor. Andrea Riccardi says he believes Pope Francis anointed Leo XIV as his successor. This has been something people have been saying for a few weeks now. Here's what the modernists have to say. From the moment Pope Leo XIV emerged from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, church observers have sought comparisons between the new U.S.-born pontiff and his predecessor, Pope Francis. Vatican experts, I wonder who they are, who worked closely with Pope Francis have underlined the close relationship between the two men, which they believe signals a shared vision for the church, despite different approaches. Andrea Riccardi, a church historian and diplomat, and founder of the lay Catholic community St. Egidio, said he believes Francis himself anointed then Cardinal Robert Prevost, the future Pope Leo XIV, as his successor. Riccardi, who worked closely with the Holy See and Pope Francis on diplomacy efforts, traveled with the Pope and helped to negotiate peace treaties in many countries, including Mozambique and Guatemala. I have the suspicion, I don't have the proof, there's your qualifier, that in the last years Bergoglio thought of Prevost to succeed him, he said, speaking at a press conference at the Foreign Press Association in Rome on Tuesday, June 10th. Riccardi, the author of several books on the church and society, acknowledged that with the exception of Pope Pius XI, no pope was able to choose his successor. Did Prevost want to become pope? Riccardi asked, citing Francis's belief that only the insane would want to become pope due to the high demands of the role. Judging by Prevost's character, serene and calm, I don't think he desired to become pope, he said. And I can tell you from the reports that have come from across the ideological spectrum of what the moment inside that room that the conclave was held in, when the vote total passed the 80 needed among the cardinals to declare pope, numerous people from across the ideological spectrum said he had his head in his hands as if he was praying and not exactly thrilled with the outcome. Riccardi said that while the relationship was initially rocky between Francis and Prevost when they met in Buenos Aires, Argentina, it improved over time until Francis appointed him in 2023 to lead the influential department overseeing bishops. When Francis in 2023 made Prevost a cardinal priest, the highest-ranking cardinal position in the church, it was clear his star was rising, Riccardi said. Pope Leo will continue the path laid out by Pope Francis with a different approach, a different character, he said. According to Riccardi, the pre-conclave gatherings at the Vatican, called general congregations, were a trial of Pope Francis, adding that it wasn't easy. While cardinals interviewed outside of the Vatican halls emphasized unity and dialogue, leaked documents and interviews shows a polarized church in the wake of Francis's death. The conclave, on the other hand, was very easy, Riccardi said, underlying how quickly the geographically diverse College of Cardinals agreed to elect Prevost in just 4 ballots over 2 days. Pope Leo is not the Pope of the Restoration, he said. He is not the anti-Bergoglio. Riccardi pushed back against media interpretations of Pope Leo that attempt to peg him as progressive or conservative, or try to interpret whether he will be in continuity with Pope Francis based on his clothing choices or where he will live. We like to immediately make comparisons, said Cardinal Matteo Zuppi, president of the Italian Bishops' Conference, during a panel organized by the Italian Association of Journalists in Ascolo Picconio, also on Tuesday. Zuppi was France's peace envoy to the Eastern European conflict and works closely with the community of St. Egidio. There is a great legacy, and right from the beginning, Pope Leo took the words of Pope Francis, he added. Zuppi said Pope Leo embraced Francis's understanding of tradition as something that we must embrace and protect, but also must be brought forward and lived. He underlined the shared concern of the two popes on the importance of peace, which Leo appealed for in his first remarks. Zuppi recalled the moment Leo walked out to the thousands gathered in St. Peter's Square shortly after his election. On all of that stuff. Now, look, nobody has ever criticized, I don't think, Pope Francis for trying to stop wars from happening. I think that was like, if even those who were very critical of him, that was very low on their priorities. But you see the attempt there to emphasize all the ways he's in continuity with him. On the other hand, this interview that I'm going to show you here is with an Augustinian monk, and it may be worse for those who want a clear break from Francis's errors, who are expecting Leo to overturn the errors of Francis. An Augustinian monk who knew Cardinal Prevost well says that Leo XIV will not be a radical break from Francis. Now, this was published on katholisch.de. This is the official news arm of the German bishops. And the thing you need to remember about the news websites for bishops' conferences, when they publish articles, they are endorsing the view expressed there. Their website, anything on it represents their voice, unless they explicitly put a disclaimer, which they never do. So the headline is, Augustinian prior on Pope Leo XIV. He is not a revolutionary. Now, that might sound reassuring to people, But that's because if you find him to be if you think that's reassuring, it's because you've accepted the idea that Francis was a revolutionary. Understand the word revolutionary in a different way. Popes typically continue the work of their predecessors. Very rarely do they make a break from them. They might rephrase things their predecessor said, but reality is most of the time they keep the work going. And why is that? Because the entire part of the central claim of the papacy is continuity with the predecessors going back to Peter. So he's asked, do you think Pope Leo XIV is a revolutionary? His response, no, he's not a revolutionary. He treats people well. He speaks kindly to everyone. He's diplomatic. That's how I experienced him as Cardinal of the Curia. When he visited our convent in Vienna last November, after the services, the people were so pleased they had taken the time for them. He didn't leave. He stayed, listened, and sought out conversations. He was always with the people and still enjoys it. That's how I experienced it. I noticed that during his first speech in the loggia. He was moved by the people and almost cried. I think he sensed that people were happy that he was here. And the way he's going to do it, it will be good. He will do his utmost and tackle the issues that are now relevant. He's not someone who sweeps things under the rug or hides them under the carpet. And on the question of can he handle the pressure, he says yes. He accepted the papacy and the responsibilities that come with it from the very beginning. Therefore, he will be able to handle it, including the pressure, the differing opinions, and factions within the Church and the Vatican. Meaning, if the modernists are pushing, and yes, even the conservatives, they're pushing, he will be able to handle it. And he's not a revolutionary, meaning he'll do it in continuity with his predecessor. That's his message. He says, I'm sure of it. I rather think that people expect too much of him, and that is the truest thing anybody has said about him so far. This is also evident in the mail we receive every day. Since his election, many people have written to us and shared their various requests for the Pope. They concern social issues, peace policy concerns, and ideas concerning church policy. Sometimes they are even crazy ideas. They bring their requests to the Pope to us so that we can pass them on directly to him. People believe that we have unhindered access to him. They imagine it's all so easy. And that is an extraordinarily true thing that he's saying. The amount of letters popes get is unbelievable. And I reported to you yesterday the attempt by Vatican media, with the Pope's permission, of course, Vatican News posting a nice little commercial for Peter's Pence, telling you to join Leo XIV's mission for the church by giving to Peter's Pence. The responses to that on social media would be outrageous under normal times. We're not in normal times. People are saying, unless you repeal fiducia supplicans and traditionis custodes and deal with James Martin and similar kinds of things, you're not getting a penny from us. That was the message in response. But people have placed their hopes and dreams on this Pope, expecting that he will either continue Francis's radical reforms, which Leo has said he's continuing the reform program of Francis. What does that mean in practice? We'll find out together. And others thinking he can just with a stroke of a pen undo the actions of his predecessor. And that Augustinian monk reminds you that he's not a revolutionary. And for a Pope to do that would be a revolutionary act. That's why it was so strange to see Francis issue Traditionis Custodes. Let's take a look here in the live chat before we're done. Question occurred to me as I saw this happen. Why does the Pope bless babies when we are told to be more like children? I mean, it's pretty standard practice. Popes bless babies. They've done that. You can find footage of John Paul II doing it. You can find accounts of popes going back to the Middle Ages doing it, the same thing. Philip says they want a revolutionary to be worse. Right. And that's kind of the point. The progressive wing of things are pushing him to be worse than Francis. We saw this all the time during Francis's reign. I would often do reports here on articles from America Magazine, National Catholic Reporter, and European outlets written by people who thought Francis was too conservative on the things he was doing to the church. He wasn't going fast enough. And now you're seeing the same language applied to Leo. And the question is, how's he going to handle it? According to that Augustinian monk, he's not a revolutionary, so he'll be able to handle it fine. Il Cervello says, Cardinal Bishop, not Cardinal Priest is the highest rank. Prevost is made Cardinal Bishop. Yeah, I found that part of that article odd. But yes, I didn't think to correct it. But I'm curious what you think about this. Traditionalist Catholic says this media effort implies that the modernists don't think the Holy Father is in their orbit. I think they're doing that on purpose because I think they know that their program is generally not that popular. Yeah, most Catholics want the James Martin crowd widely accepted by the church. But most Catholics also want, McCarrick-type priests taken care of, that issue taken care of. And they want stability in their parishes. And the problem is their program doesn't do that. Damon Keller gives one view. He said with the super chat, thank you, sir. Leo will use doctrine and law to destroy doctrine and law. That's one view. We shall see. As I showed you yesterday, his appointments to the bishops have been largely pretty awful. And I've seen a lot of people defend them, talking about how hard it is to get anybody to be a bishop and all those things. We'll see, but his appointments, remember, personnel is policy. But we'll see. I'm curious, though, what you think about all this, so let me know in the comments, please. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps, too. And you will find links to everything I covered today in my show notes at returntotradition.org. I will leave you with one other thought. There was a cardinal in South America, in Peru, another Augustinian, who knew Cardinal Prevost well. And when he was asked about people, this belief that he will undo things Francis did, he laughed at that and said, no. Things will continue on the way they are. That could be the truth, or it could be more of this media pressure. My intention is tomorrow to show you the pressure coming from the other side. But until then, let me know what you think about this in the comments, please. Like and subscribe if you haven't. It does help. Sharing this on social media helps a lot too. Fairy Spin Fivers, I pronounce it the way I pronounce it. As always, pray for the church. I'm Anthony Stine. Ave Maria.